Right, good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, yeah, we're at part 3 as we were saying. So, the purpose of this series was one to tap into the whole conversation that's happening about the whole feminine rising in many ways. I mean, whether it's practical or in a spiritual, metaphysical way. But of course, the idea is also to demystify the process and look at what does it mean for us as regular people on the street. What does it mean in terms of using the feminine energies that we have within us, and also understand the impact of the need for using the masculine and the feminine in balance psychologically, mentally, in terms of emotional health, and of course the practical repercussions of it. So we began the series by speaking about the psychological archetypes of the masculine and the feminine, which Carl Jung calls as the anima and the animus, and also spoke about the idea of anima development in the sense of how does the feminine archetype develop in each of us. So historically there has been that trend of moving the feminine, moving from just being the prodder of the unconscious. So as humans in a conditioned society, we've learned to operate from the logical conditioned mind, and the feminine in general is supposed to be the seat of the unconscious, which all of us hold, but we're not very aware of when and how we are using it. So these stages of anima development are about how the feminine and how the unconscious therefore has shifted in its role and in its wisdom, so to say. Of course, the unconscious contains both the masculine and the feminine aspects, but the anima development largely speaks about the feminine piece of the unconscious. And the role of the anima is, as we said, largely the seat of the unconscious, but it also holds our spiritual energy, it holds our creative piece as well as the destructive piece. The parts of our body, even the metabolic and the other systems in the body which are responsible for generation of cells, which are responsible for killing cells every day so that the body remains in rhythm and healthy, all of that is the feminine acting, and the maintenance energy is the masculine, which ensures that the body runs well. Right? So the physical health is maintained or corrected, as the case may be. The last time we spoke about what's termed as the heroine's journey, which is more the sociological aspect of the feminine, and how do we reflect on our own journeys in this life. So the heroine's journey came from what used to be called the hero's journey, which was compiled by Joseph Campbell, and which later was popularized as the monomyth, where the claim was that all human beings seem to follow a certain pattern, right, which is largely about growing up peacefully and then somewhere feeling challenged in life, facing up to that challenge, facing the enemies, which is internal enemies largely, so conquering our fears along the way, conquering our things that we resist, embracing the negative aspects of ourselves in the course of our life, and in that process coming home, so to say, which means towards the later part of the journey we integrate the good and the bad in us, the anima and the animus, the conscious and the unconscious. So that's the concept of the journey, and the heroine's journey was something that this lady Maureen Murdoch proposed, where she said that somehow women journey differently than men, because if you look at most myths or stories or movies around the world, somehow the journey is always about getting to the woman, whether it is the Helen of Troy or Sita in Ramayana or Draupadi in Mahabharata. The wars have been about getting the woman. So somewhere the female archetype has been the prize, so to say. Having said that, it's not that women don't make the journey, they do it in their own ways, because the masculine in a woman would also make the journey. Today, speaking about the gender spectrum. This was something I wanted to bring into this conversation for multiple reasons. One, because all around the world now we see a lot of conversation happening on gender, not just in terms of rape of women by men or sexual abuse, but in terms of acknowledging the third gender, in terms of the third gender coming into politics, into education, and getting visibility around the world. Secondly, I wanted to bring in gender from the perspective of understanding ourselves psychologically and mentally, and looking at the impact of gender on our emotional health, which sometimes, and more than sometimes, very often goes unacknowledged. It's not a conversation that we tend to have with ourselves or around us. And thirdly, a lot of my work around peace building and conflict resolution contains the element of gender identity and how that impacts conflicts around the world, whether it's conflicts in socio-political conflicts or family conflicts or even corporate conflicts. Gender has always been a major bone of contention in a way. So that's something that we need to start thinking about. So the hope is through this talk we generate the conversation amongst ourselves and also perhaps lead the conversation outside of the sphere as well. So first things first, the term gender and sex are often interchangeably used. However, one thing I wanted to bring into perspective here is gender is different from sex. Right? Any perspectives on that before we go ahead? How do we?
By sex you mean male, female, or?
Yes.
But these are all notional values, no? Many times. I mean, this, ultimately biologically it affects. But the entity that is within us, that will have more impact on psychological.
Yes, it is notional in the sense, yeah, there is an intangible aspect to it, yes. But there is also a physical aspect to it. So when we use the term sex as in male or female, what we largely mean is the biological part of the gender, right? And whereas gender in itself is, yeah, notional in the sense that it has more than sex. One part of gender is the biological sex in terms of are we male or female or the third gender. But gender also has a lot of other social components which we take on pretty much unconsciously in most cases. But all that we take on, if it doesn't agree with our physiological or emotional or psychological being, then that there is a huge conflict. And those conflicts are much more than we acknowledge. Because it's, while we normally think of the world as male or female, it's very rarely as simple. So the term cisgender that is used these days, cisgender is that you've been identified with a set of physical organs that correspond to one gender, and you're very clearly psychologically, emotionally also of that gender, that's cisgender. So you're either clearly male or clearly female. However, more often than not, we are not really as cisgender as we assume we are. We have components of the other gender very often, and therefore the idea of the gender spectrum, in that it's very rarely this or that, it's somewhere in that continuum, somewhere in that spectrum.
Percentage may differ.
Yes. So hence the conversation about the spectrum, and also the opportunity for us to reflect on where am I on the spectrum, and do I want to reclaim a certain identity and the strengths that come with that identity.
But most of the creative aspect is generally feminine. As a term.
In general, yeah, I mean the energy that, so when we say feminine, it's nothing to do with female.
Correct.
It's just that the kind of energy that creates disruption and therefore creativity is what is termed the feminine. It's just a matter of a term. It's not.
Soft side.
Yes, and it is the less defined and the less clear, more ambiguous. Yeah, in that sense, it is the feminine. Yes. So if you were to look at the identity, sexual identity and gender identity as two different aspects, the sexual identity, the components of sexual identity are largely physiological. So it has our hormones, it has the internal reproductive organs that we have, the external genitalia, the chromosomal factor, right, which is the sexual identity. So that can be determined medically. Gender identity is really for an individual to determine. It's not anybody else's game, and it's really difficult to identify or determine gender identity for anybody else, because it's way beyond the sexual identity, right? So gender identity beyond the sex piece has to do with gender roles which society typically assigns, right? So if you look at most traditional societies, that there is the aspect of the male gender role being the provider and somebody who goes out and earns money, maintains family, and the female is the nurturer and therefore maintains the home and gives birth to children, takes care of children. So there is an assigned gender role, and in most societies when the gender roles are challenged, there is
more of male, I think.
more of male in what way?
I don't know, but I'm getting it. But
Are you saying that there is more focus on the male? Yeah, yes. And therefore the patriarchal system around it, right? Because the role of the provider is given a lot of credence and importance, therefore all the other things in society, including laws, economics, family structures, institutional structures, get built around that gender identity. So in a way, the entire world and the systems we live in, including the political, socio-economic systems, are built around the gender identity of the male role being more important. Somebody who goes out and earns is more important than the other role. Okay?
But nowadays, if you see, I mean, not exactly related to this, if you see the feminine aspect were suppressed previously, since the time of cave time and all these things.
Yes.
Now, is there any eruption in the feminine side that we are suppressed at that time? So because of some genetic changes, now we want to suppress male side.
Well,
Something.
That's not really.
Changes in DNA or.
Well, I'm sure we're genetically mutating all the time, certainly. But no, when we say rise of the feminine, it's not really about making up for that or compensating and therefore subduing men. No, it's certainly not that. Yeah.
In some pockets, you see that.
Yes, because if you look at it over centuries, there has been a lot of suppressed rage and anger and all of that, and emotions are stored in the genetic memory, and therefore even if, let's say, I personally may not have faced gender bias, I would still carry things in the genetic memory which may come from my ancestral women, right? And therefore, that gets stored in the unconscious, and therefore it might erupt in a way that I may not really understand why, right? So it may come up in the form of prejudice against men, it may come up in the form of fear against men, which has nothing to do with my personal experience. It's just there in the genetic memory. Yeah.
What about the system? Since the system is mostly male oriented,
Yes.
dominant,
Yes.
and even female, chances are they are also getting more masculine.
Masculine. Yes.
Means that femininity is less
Yes.
That is
Yeah.
suppressed somewhere.
And therefore, when we say the feminine now, it is not so much about suppressing the masculine, it is really about bringing that balance and saying, okay, both are equally important and both need to coexist and cohabit. That there is no way you can. It's feminism in general is not about suppressing the masculine or being against the masculine. It's just about saying both are equally important, right? So both are equally important in the male-female sense of the term, and also in the sense of the need for appreciating both the masculine and feminine energies within us, medically, biologically, socially, legally, politically, all of that. So it's just about to me, working with the feminine is about bringing that balance. It's not against men or against masculine in any way. But yes, gender roles are, when gender roles get challenged, there is usually a lot of upheaval in any society, right? Which continues in many ways. I mean, we see, for example, even today, Saudi Arabia has a problem with women driving, and the gender role is getting challenged, where there was an assigned thing saying men drive, women don't, and when the role is getting challenged, it disrupts the system, it upsets people, and therefore there is a lot of negative connotations to it, including things being done against women and more suppression. So that there is that very conscious suppression of the feminine happening because of the challenge to the gender roles. And that's nothing to do with just the sex part of it. It's just the role ascribed to the gender, which says women do only this and men do other things. Right? So one is the ascribed gender roles in whatever community or society that we come from. And that's something very interesting to study, in the sense in general, we assume that it's been a patriarchal world the last few centuries. However, if you look at a lot of some tribal societies, some small pockets of communities around the world, which are not necessarily mainstream in the sense their economic development has not been similar to that of the mainstream that we speak about, you will find a very different world as far as gender roles are concerned, and a very different approach to gender. They are in fact a lot more open than we are in the so-called mainstream of society. Right? So when we say mainstream, I'm largely going by population and numbers. It's not so much about the value we bring to society necessarily. So yeah, gender includes gender roles. It includes the outward presentation based on the gender role you've taken on, and of course the internal self-image based on the gender. Right? And all of those can create conflict if the gender role has not been consciously taken up. And more often than not, it's not consciously taken up. The gender role is something that is pushed down to us, and we think that's what it is, and we take it on from there. So if I have been told that, okay, you're a girl, you're supposed to do this, wear this, don't do this, don't go here, speak this way, I might take that on unconsciously as a child, believing that that's how it's supposed to be. But if it is in conflict with what I really feel, what I really want to do, or what my body may physically feel, then there's huge internal conflict which may not get addressed at all, and sometimes it may not get acknowledged at all, even by myself, forget the society around me. And therefore the good part is a lot of primary educational institutions are now starting to speak about gender identity and sexual identity at a young age, to say you have a choice. It's not that your parents say you're a boy and a girl and therefore you're a boy and a girl. There is that conversation happening to say you're born with these physical parts, however gender is much more, and therefore you choose what identity you want to take on in going along. So hopefully the kind of society we'll see a few years from now will be more balanced than what we currently have, and therefore much less conflict, much less violence in the society as a result of suppressed or repressed gender identity. So what do we mean by the gender spectrum? So when we say spectrum, yeah, the two ends of the continuum are male and female, right? But very few people would fit into those ends. In the sense, when we say pure female or pure male, what we mean is you're biologically completely female and completely male, plus your emotional identity is also completely female, completely male. Your mental identity, your social preference is also completely male or female, right? Which is really very few people. Most of us would fall somewhere in between that spectrum. So, what are the other things available in the spectrum? One aspect is the agender people. There are huge numbers of people around the world who would genuinely identify with the agender aspect, in the sense that while they may be born with certain sexual organs, they may not particularly connect with it emotionally and mentally, and therefore they don't feel the need for a gender identity. Right? It's not necessarily asexual, but they don't identify with themselves as a man or a woman or third gender. The base primary identity is just a human, and there's no need to express sexuality as much in any way, whether it's physically or even through clothes, through behavior. And you have a significant percentage of the population which is actually agender, which
We call
Yeah.
it as a revolutionary, but
Yeah.
actually they are not.
yeah, and it's a very valid identity
Yeah.
in the sense that gender is not a part of their identity that they connect with. So if you force them to wear male clothes or female clothes and behave as a man or behave as a woman, it's very uncomfortable for them, because that's not something they want to acknowledge. They really want to be neutral.
It is as a only means, that's all.
Yeah, and for them it's just a biological accident and nothing more, and there's no connect as such with that part of their identity. Sadly enough, we don't acknowledge that. We don't think of, or we don't sometimes allow people to be gender neutral. Right, so although it is coming up now in some ways with a lot of unisex clothing and all of that happening in small pockets, but very little compared to the huge amount of population that would fall under this piece of the spectrum.
But is it a good, or does that the indication of disrupting even marriages and all these things? Because it may like a living
it will.
relationship
Yes.
and all these things. It's a part, what I mean, it's a start. Good or bad is a separate issue.
Yes.
I mean, but as a marriage system we have,
Yeah.
and, whatever natural, what you call, maybe given by God, to develop a family and go with the flow.
Yeah.
So is it a danger to disrupt that?
Well, in the sense, is it dangerous?
Dangerous, what I mean, the- not exactly, I don't know how to put it in the words, but after the marriage, if the same thinking goes on,
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah.
the role is definitely different. Role is financially or household activity and all this can be shared.
Yes.
That is a different thing. But the children's attachment as a mother,
Yes.
or that is required. And this development, they may not provide that.
It is disruptive, certainly. Is it dangerous? Not really, because as far as the millennia of evolution that we've seen
Dangerous
goes,
to the frame. I mean, it may.
yeah, it will disrupt the frame, certainly. Yes. But it's like asking, was that shift from the Victorian society to now dangerous? Yes, it was dangerous in the sense that society died.
Maybe our
Yes.
whole, system actually may change.
Yes, the system collapsed, right? And now we live in a different system. But yeah, as we evolve, and the evolution is also physiological, genetic, and mental, it needs to change. If we do not allow it to change, then there is
Then
problem.
it may find some
Yes.
difference.
And in fact, a lot of the violence around the world is really about suppressed gender identity. And when I say suppressed gender identity, I don't necessarily only mean the LGBT community. It's also men and women who don't allow themselves to be anything more than just men and women. on two ends of the spectrum. Most of us are somewhere in between, and that doesn't get acknowledged, and that gets channeled as violence against either the other gender or whatever else that we find around us that's distasteful to us. So it is important to acknowledge and also allow all aspects of the spectrum. So there is the agender piece, and there is very importantly this piece of what's termed as gender fluidity, and you will again find a whole lot of people around the world. Gender fluidity is a person who's gender fluid is somebody who doesn't feel the need to be only man or only woman. So there could be times in my life I might feel more masculine, and therefore I want to live like a man, dress like a man, behave like a man. And there could be times in my life I feel feminine. Right? In some cases, people who are gender fluid may also have both organs, and therefore there is a physiological cause for that need also. But in a lot of cases, they may be medically cisgender, in the sense medically they are male or female, but the psychological identity is very fluid, and therefore they swing both in terms of either being male or being female at different times in their lives. Right? And that's something that we're seeing more and more of, in terms of, it probably always existed, but there are more and more people coming out and saying, okay, I am gender fluid, and therefore maybe these few years in my life I'm going to live like a man, these few years I'm going to be female, and that's okay too, and that needs to get allowed.
But is it only a correlation, or is it a hormonal imbalance?
It is, well, in terms of social conditioning, you might think of it as imbalance. Psychologically, it's just healthy expression of who you are. Because if it's genuine gender fluidity, it is coming from your internal mental and emotional space. It's not coming from a space of conditioning, and that needs to be expressed psychologically. Right? So in that sense, I mean, socially, if you look at it, it's disruptive, and therefore it may be termed imbalance. But psychologically, no, it is something that needs to be allowed. Yeah. So yes, very rarely are we in this or this end of the spectrum. We are somewhere in between, in the genuine sense of the term. But yes, our social identity and the gender role may be somewhere here or here. In fact, the more evolved societies around the world actually embrace the gender spectrum. You will find one of the most fascinating communities in this regard is the Bugis people in Indonesia, and it's a huge community. I think the population is to be about 6 to 7 million now, so it's not a small tribe. It's a big community in Indonesia, and they actually ascribe 5 different gender roles, socially allowed. Yeah, in the sense you can identify yourself as male, female, transgender, as in the third gender, as in neutral. You could be more male and third gender, or you could be more female and third gender. So they actually acknowledge 5 different genders, and people are categorized as such, and they choose how they wish to be identified as. And they actually have names for those 5 different genders, and their social roles also get chosen depending upon the gender. So the community as a whole has identified that certain genders are more suited to certain kinds of work. So the third gender, for example, which is an equal balance of masculine and the feminine energies, both of them being well balanced and utilized by the person, is acknowledged for doing certain roles very well. Right? So there are specific professions that are ascribed to that role. There are specific social conventions that are given to that role. So people are allowed to choose where they feel they are on the spectrum. So in that sense, it's an extremely evolved society. Conflict is low because identity is not suppressed. Right? You're allowed to be what you would like to be, and therefore dress the way, take on those roles.
They think it is normal.
Yeah. Yeah. And it genuinely biologically is normal. Right? I mean, very few of us would, produce equal amount of, or let's say as a man, it's not necessary that every man produces the same amount of testosterone. It's everybody is different. Some men may produce more estrogen, and that's just biological, and that's okay. It's just that it's not allowed, and therefore we don't allow certain emotions or certain needs that may come up because certain hormones are produced, because social expectations are otherwise designed. So in a way, the whole gender identity issue it's a question of structural conflict. We've created a system which induces conflict, and because that conflict is not expressed and spoken about as gender identity, the conflict gets channeled into violence in other forms, and which is actually very disruptive in a bad way for the society. So therefore there is all the more need for conversation about where am I on the spectrum and how would I like to therefore express myself. To pick up on your point about will it disrupt marriage as an institution, I think that's already getting disrupted in most parts of the world. I mean, there are countries like Iceland that have actually gone public acknowledging that as a society we don't need marriage. And that's a majority of population of Iceland. I think there was some recent surveys about 67% of the population that said we don't need marriage as a society. Yeah, they completely tipped the scale and said why do we even need marriage as an institution? It is outdated and it is unnatural, which is true. It is unnatural. It's a very artificial human created situation thing, which is not very healthy in the long run. It's about living your truth. It doesn't, see, it's not about,
Everybody is independent.
yeah, see, you're coexisting. It doesn't mean you're immoral. It doesn't mean you're indulging in debauchery or anything of that. So what they're looking at is building healthy communities, which means, okay, if I choose to have a child with a certain person, I might choose to do that, and as a partner, he may choose to collaborate and bring it up together. I may have other people in society who may want to help me bring up this child. The community raises the children without it being about one parent or one,
In terms of identifying individually.
Yes. And everyone is allowed that space to assert their own truth. Right? And in the long run, that's a healthy way to live, in the sense that emotionally at least hassles are lesser, internal conflicts are lesser, and therefore in the long run external conflicts will reduce.
Long run it may be, I
Yes.
don't know. See, because human being may act certain things on impulse. Now because of marriage, there is certain binding.
Safety.
Safety.
Yes.
Including support from relatives also. And since it is a legal binding, if outburst is there of emotion, and after some time, because of the boundary, at that time the person may, your wife or husband may stop for some time.
Yes.
And after retrospecting, the role or that emotional outburst, thinking maybe, oh, that was wrong. But if that system is not there,
Yes.
then immediately at that point,
You separate them.
Separate.
Yeah.
and then it is very difficult to come again.
Yes.
So,
So yeah, I mean, for the system to become healthy, yes, it will take probably a few years and more.
More may come.
Yes.
I mean, pattern.
Yeah. It's not an easy change. It's certainly going to be hugely disruptive and therefore chaotic in the interim. But yeah, in the longer run, it's more truthful, it's more honest, and there is a lot more sense of community than there is now. Because end of the day, the family system, because it is artificially created, a lot of emotional hassles happen in the scope of the family because it's an artificially generated boundary. It's not a chosen boundary, right? It's not that I've chosen a partner or a parenting partner or you know, like a adopted mother or anybody. It's not out of choice.
Still, only in urban part, villages and all, still it is thrusted.
Yes.
Many years.
Yes, more often than not. Yeah. So yeah, we're moving towards a more what's termed a gender expansive society. So therefore, and the feminine perspective on gender is really about inclusion. It's about saying that there is more than two genders, and it's important that we include all those things that are in between. And when I mean include, it's about allowing it within ourselves to start with, to say that yes, sometimes I think like a man or I feel like doing things like a man, and that's okay. So allowing that in self, and therefore allowing that and facilitating that for others as well, and therefore the whole diversity acknowledgement and the action towards inclusion. The other aspect from the feminine perspective is about making gender a matter of choice and not a matter of social imposition. So it's not that I'm a girl because I was told I'm a girl, but I want to be one. Right?
It's an internal thing.
Yeah, and it really needs to come from the person, because nobody else is living in your body and in your mind. You are living in it, so nobody really has that right to determine that. Unfortunately, we have been determining that for each other, and that causes a lot of grief. So gender expansiveness, and that was really the agenda for this talk, is to create that conversation to say how can we expand in terms of our gender identity as individuals here, and how can we facilitate. To allow that and to say yes, there is a very active feminine part of me, and that needs to be expressed in whatever way it could, and therefore letting go of stereotypes like wearing a pink shirt or wearing baggy trousers as a woman or any of that. So long as we allow more of those expressions in a healthy way, and not necessarily for the sake of rebellion, that we will enter a more gender expanded society. So
that awareness is coming.
it is, but I think we need to have a lot more conversations about it, especially with children, because that's where we tend to fix identity, and then they grow up believing that's who they are when they really are not that.
That is not happening in family society. Maybe you are a boy,
Yes.
so and you are a girl, so घर में सब काम आप. And all this thing is thrusted.
And so much of violence happens later in life because of that, right? I mean, women hold so much anger against men, not because necessarily the men in their lives have done it. It's just that there's been an identity thrust, and that's not acceptable to them. So a lot of times the violence or the rape is not against the individual or the other sex, but about that rage of having been imposed upon.
Yeah, I have seen some of the family, actually it is an unfortunate part. For boys and all this thing, they give even they discriminate in terms of food.
Oh yes,
I mean,
everything. I mean, the quality of food, the quantity of it, all of that, right? Everything from nutrition to space to clothes to hygiene, everything gets impacted because there's a gender role ascribed. So yes, so maybe in terms of peace building around the world, if this is something that individuals can work upon, I'm sure we'll make a lot of difference to the world in the long run. So that's that for today.